I'm privileged to be speaking with a lady who epitomises the philosophy of U3A. I'm Janice Bauer from the U3A film crew, and I'm really happy to have Jennie Cox with me today. Jennie, you currently live in Shoalwater and are a member of the Rockingham region, but I remember you telling me earlier that your roots were somewhere else. Can you tell me about that?
I was actually born in Cottesloe. My family were all Fremantle, East Fremantle and North Fremantle. But my father moved when his parents moved up to Bindarian Parade in Claremont, and he bought a house in McNeill Street, which is just opposite PLC, and that's where I was born and that's where I was brought up.
You told me earlier that North Fremantle had a great significance for you. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, my father's family had Pierce Brothers boots and shoes. Extremely important during the war, because they actually made all the boots for the army.
I remember them.
They did very well, yes, and they were quite famous for their boots and shoes. And the factory was down on the Swan River, near the old bridge. And the interesting part about it is, environmentally, it was probably a nightmare because the tannery was on the water. Amazing smell, as tanneries do, which we actually loved. You know, it was terribly damaging to the river, I'm sure, looking back, knowing the things I know now. But my father was very frail, and he actually died when we were 9, so it was a nice little woman's homestead in McNeill Street.
After school, I understand you went into nursing. What was it like for you then?
It was, did not think of doing anything else. All my aunts on both sides of my family did their nursing at Fremantle Hospital, and I started as a runner, which was really funny because you ran from one end of the hospital to the other. We didn't have great communication in those days, and so you ran with pathology forms, and you ran to pathology to pick up the bits, and etc. So I really got to know the hospital very well before I started, which was a great boon. And I'd actually done all my nursing exams at school. An enlightened teacher who put me through all the necessary exams that we needed for us. We had invalid cooking and hygiene and physiology and biology was essential for our learning. So that was very good, yes.
I remember you telling me that a lot of the patients were from Europe.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that experience.
Yes, it was very interesting. It was very multicultural in Fremantle in those days. And a lot of cray fishermen used to come in badly damaged. And we had a community ward, a male community ward, and all the sailors would come in from overseas boats, and both industrial and passenger ships.
I take it perhaps you got married during your nursing years?
I
children?
did. We weren't allowed to get married, but as soon as I finished, I did get married, and I was then invited back to Fremantle Hospital. So that was nice. I had a year of staff nursing. We used to have to be invited to be staff nurses in those days. So that was lovely. I did the clinics because I was married, so it was an 8 to 5 job.
How did you juggle your working life with children?
Well, then I resigned when I had my first child, right. Yes. So,
you told me earlier that you went back to nursing after you had your children, but the profession had changed. What happened?
I went back to nursing after all my children went into secondary school, and I did a refresher, which we had to do, And then I went back to nursing, but I started off in nursing homes, as a lot of people did, because we could do part-time work. But then I became very restless because I wanted to get into acute nursing. So I applied to Mount Henry, which was a state-run nursing home in those days.
Was it during this time at Mount Henry that you realised you might have to upgrade your qualifications and attend at ECU?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
The Edith Cowan started offering a nursing. Edith Cowan and Curtin University offered the nurse degree. It was a applied science degree. As soon as the degree became available, great majority of the people I knew actually who were working full time actually took it up. And they all had responsibilities, children and houses and husbands. And my poor husband, he actually had all our children going to university and myself at the same time because they had all finished school. So it was a really, really hard time.
You've given me a little bit of background into how you became interested in aged care. Could you expand on that a little bit and tell me how you became involved and what you did about it?
Purely because a lot of it, as I said earlier, we went into what we call C-class hospitals or nursing homes when we first went back to work. And it showed me exactly what the aged care system was like. Then going to Mount Henry really shaped my opinion on how aged care should be advanced. So after I'd finished my degree and Mount Henry was closed, I went to Armidale Hospital, which was, we'd moved to Shoalwater by this stage. I joined the Nurses Federation and became a union rep, which was really interesting. I learned how to stand up for myself and for other people. When I went to Armidale, I was actually part of the aged care assessment team. My job was to keep people at home. And this was the sort of turn in thinking of government because they realised it was much cheaper to keep people at home than have them in nursing homes. I worked very hard, and especially through my continence, to keep people at home and independent. And then when I went back to Fremantle Hospital to finish my working life, it became my goal to keep everybody at home. And that remains my goal.
Well, you were a living example.
Yes, exactly. I think, well, number one is cheaper for government, and it is so much better. A well-managed care package is excellent, if you can get one.
And diabetes was in there somewhere too.
Yes. And I did a diabetes educators course at Curtin. It was, I didn't actually work in diabetes education, but it was very helpful in my nursing role in general, and trying to alleviate the diabetic pregnant women because it was so difficult for them to, they couldn't take any medication, yet they had to survive somehow.
When did you give up work altogether?
I retired at 68, and then I joined U3A because I considered that it would be a very high standard of learning, lifelong learning, because U3A at Rockingham branch was affiliated with the Perth branch, which was affiliated and set up by UWA. And that influenced me to ring up and find out more about it, and that's when I joined the Rockingham branch. We set up our first seminar with some speakers from Murdoch, and that was a very interesting experience, and that went off very well. There was Diana Morgan, and John MacDonald and myself. We had our, Geoffrey Bolton was our main speaker, yes, from Murdoch. We really need to maintain that level of knowledge, and I strongly believe that we should stay very much affiliated with all universities that we possibly can, either local or at council level or at city level, wherever possible. I think it's important for University of the Third Age to be affiliated with universities.
U3A's motto is learn, laugh and live. Do you think this reflects the current approach to the organisation?
I think it's important that we maintain our membership, which may be the reason that there are less academic activities going on. I realise that, but I still think we need to maintain our roots and don't get lost in the activities that don't involve learning and learning of a high standard.
What you've said in the last few minutes kind of explains what you think ought to happen to improve or change the way U3A operates to attract more members. Or not. Maybe some people think it's a bit too academic.
Yes, I think unfortunately, finding out the hard way, that to maintain membership, it needs to become less academic. It is more a more populist view. But I still think the main gateways to learning would be the universities, through the arts, through the big libraries, through the structures and the institutions that are recognised as learning.
By now we all know that you've just completed another bachelor's degree, this time a Bachelor of Arts in Indigenous Studies. What motivated you to do this?
Well, Murdoch came to Rockingham. The Rockingham branch immediately, through Andrew Taggart, formed a very strong affiliation. Andrew was acting Vice-Chancellor at the time. So we managed to get a grant from the council, and we paid our way to allow members to go to and sit in on all the lectures that were down here. But it was mainly for the industrial area. Of course, it was open for engineering. Eventually, the campus down here closed. Our greatest loss was the loss of Murdoch campus. Our second greatest loss down here was the loss of the library, because Murdoch had funded the library, of course, with the City of Rockingham.
You were unable to attend the formal graduation ceremony up at RAC Arena, so the university came to you.
Yes.
Tell me what that was like for you.
Well, I think we really all thoroughly enjoyed it. I was completely amazed when they offered. And then my testimonial arrived in the mail, so I thought, oh, well, that's the end of that. And then I had a call from David Harrison from the Chancellor's office, and he said, oh, yes, let's do it. So we did. And so U3A came. We had a family and a few friends. And Gary Smith, who's the Chancellor, and his entourage arrived. And they brought the morning tea, and we had all the regalia, and all the people who could, including Janice, wore their regalia. So it was a really fun morning.
You've got the most spectacular garden here. How did it evolve?
I like a garden. I think my grandmother was a gardener, my mother was a gardener, and I just gardened, and this just evolved down here. When we came to Shoalwater, and it took me 20 years to actually feel that I belonged here, but I'm belonging in my garden now. Yes.
Between your studies and your garden.
Oh yes, it's very busy. And all my grandchildren.
And all your grandies. How many grandchildren have you got?
I have 8 now.
Now that you've graduated with yet another degree, that you are enrolling in a master's.
Well, yes, hopefully.
Gosh, is there any stopping you?
Well,
Why did you choose to do
it just becomes
that?
a habit of studying, I think. I just enjoy it. And it's the only way I learn properly is really put myself down and put my head down and write essays and do some research. And I really like doing research.
So what's your area of interest in the Masters?
Well, I'm hoping to look at food security in the world, which really encompasses everything.
As I said in my opening remarks, you are the epitome of what U3A is about, and a wonderful example of how lifelong learning keeps us young and youthful and engaged with the world, and how third ages like you can inspire others and still have something meaningful to offer the world. Jennie, thank you so much for speaking with me today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Janice.